This episode of Archispeak is sponsored by, you guessed it, Arcat. You may know about Charrette, Arcat's free tool to organize and collaborate your architecture projects, but did you know that Charrette can promote your projects too?
In Charrette, you can create your firm's portfolio, upload the photos you want, and control the project information you wish to share.
Create links back to your firm's website and share contact details so clients can reach out to you. Check out Charrette at Arcat. That's arcat.com/projects.
Welcome to Archispeak, the podcast that talks about what it's like to work in the profession of architecture.
Welcome to episode 156 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan. So, Evan, they always say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but since you just got back from Vegas, tell us what you were doing there.
I really can't say.
Oh, no, you can.
Oh, yes, you must. What did you do in Vegas this past week?
So we're recording a little bit late here because of my my week in Vegas, and it was a long week, I have to say. Man, I'm super tired. So we just got back from the last AU, the Autodesk University. So this was my fourth one that I've gone to, and I still think it's one of the better places to go to learn how to do whatever you want to know, how to be better at what you do in regards to technology. So what's interesting about this show is that it brings lots of disciplines together in kind of a cross-pollination effort. So you've got architecture, engineering, you've got all the different industrial design, mechanical design. There's just so many different aspects because they all touch Autodesk software. And so this is like Autodesk one location to bring all those people together and really start to talk about the convergence of these different things where, we're doing lots of interesting machine learning, AI-based stuff in architecture. Well, guess what? These other disciplines are too. And so it's kind of a place to share that kind of information and show off what people are doing with things. So if you're in manufacturing and you're working for Boeing and you're talking about 3D printing your next airliner, you're also going to be talking to people who are thinking about 3D printing buildings. So lots of real high-level technical stuff, but then also lots of real nitty-gritty stuff that happens in classes, and then the networking opportunities. So it's kind of Autodesk's opportunity to try to sell you the entire time in their keynote addresses. It really does kind of, unfortunately, come across as a big sales pitch, I think. But it's also inspiring on some level because they bring in lots of other speakers who have talked about huge advances that they've made in pretty short amount of time, technology-wise, in their companies. And they really take the opportunity to show those off on the main stage. Mm-hmm. In between sales pitches. And then you all go into the expo floor and you get to see this stuff in action and you're networking with people, meeting people, learning things that you could be doing better in your company and hopefully taking that back and showing it to everybody else there and moving things forward. But then there's also the class component, which is more of the nitty-gritty stuff from beginner to very advanced. Different things in all of those different disciplines, including game design, filmmaking, like I said, anything that kind of Autodesk software touches. And it's not strictly limited to Autodesk software. There's definitely people in there using other things as well, but it's mostly regarding, it just kind of loosely flows around those bigger ideas of, so if you wanted to learn Dynamo, this is a great place to go do a lab class or sit in and see how Burrow Happold is launching a scripting library across their company and getting people to adopt scripts. Or I did classes on basically how to capture knowledge and how to disseminate it to your multi-office or even global team, right? So it's a great place for me to go when I'm starting to develop a training program and actually take notes from, somebody like Perkins and Will, for instance, who's launched this micro knowledge system and they kind of just show off exactly how they do it and why they do it that way and what's worked for them, what they plan on doing better in the future. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it by the end, you can't take any more, right? You kind of have to figure out how to wrap your head around all this stuff and disseminate the key information back to your team. at when you get back to the office, because it's like a nonstop onslaught of information. It's just all on all the time. Every day, you get up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, go to breakfast, go to classes, do the keynotes, do the expo floor. You're done at 7:30 at night. So it's like 3 12 to 14-hour days in a row. It is a lot of work. I mean, people think, oh yeah, it's in Vegas, you're out messing around. Like it's seriously like it's a mental and physical workout in the regard of like just walking. You walk so much because it's all in the Sands Expo, and you're at a hotel and you're kind of going back and forth in between all these classes and stuff like that. And they really keep you there the whole time because they serve all the food. It's all inclusive the whole time. It's like being on a freaking cruise ship. It's like it's just really intense. And so the last day, my friend drove in and we went rock climbing up in Red Rocks because it was just had to get out of Vegas. And Red Rocks, if you guys don't know, it's like 30 minutes up off the strip, and you cannot see the strip from Red Rocks. And it's a beautiful like canyon preserve, and it looks like the Southwest desert that you kind of think of when you see Zion National Park or something like that. And it's just gorgeous. And we went and did a big multi-pitch climb up there yesterday and didn't think about architecture. We didn't think about technology. We didn't think about anything like that for the whole day. And we just drove home late last night. So I'm kind of burnt out, but at the same time, like it was a great ending to a pretty good week. So
were you able to see those cranes in the distance building that?
No, shut up. Just shut up.
Wait, what?
We had a nice little positive show going
Neil,
on.
you don't even know what he was going to ask.
I know exactly what he's going to talk about.
I was wondering how.
Shut your hole.
I was wondering how
on.
the development of
move on, please.
Downtown is in preparation for the coming AIA convention. Up. What would be happening there? And by the way, there might be some football going on.
Bunch of bullshit.
Nope, I didn't see it, but I have seen it before, and it is happening. So,
yeah,
Don't worry, Neil. It's not just some news story on the internet. It's a real thing. It's actually happening.
It's not fake news.
No, it's not fake news. I refuse to acknowledge its existence.
Well, you can only do that for so much longer.
I was going to say
enough.
Exactly.
True enough.
So I shot a lot of video at the show. I plan on putting together a YouTube video, like a synopsis of my experience. It won't be fully it's hopefully going to be a little more entertaining than informational because, you can watch these AU classes online. I guess I should point that out, that if you go to Autodesk University on the web, they just announced during the show that they launched a whole new website for this. They were very excited about it. I don't know if anybody else was, but it was.
If you can't get excited about what you're doing, then why bother?
Hopefully, it's a little bit better than the existing one because it is kind of hard to find stuff. But what's nice about these talks is almost every one of them is recorded, and that may not mean video, but it does usually mean audio and whatever slideshow they had up on the screen. And so video in that sense, but not like live video of the speaker. And they have the handouts that you can download as well. And all of that is free. So if you didn't get to go to the show, you can still benefit from the classes and from the live streams that they have recorded. And you can kind of see what they're up to with all this stuff. So definitely they're making the information available, and you have no excuse not to learn something on there. There's a lot of really, really great stuff.
Well, so let me ask you this in all seriousness without, getting Neil's dander up.
My what?
Anyway.
Fluffy.
So, this is a pretty large conference, and the coming AIA conference is going to be in Vegas as well. I mean, do you think that this helps kind of set the stage for the excitement of architects being out there? Because I know that there's a lot of architects that attended AU because we had a handful of them from our office. Mm-hmm. Because to be quite honest with you, when they announced that it was going to be in Vegas next year, I was just like, oh, well, there's something I could probably skip. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if you feel differently going to Vegas and AU for this, that the AIA convention might actually be a success. Just curious.
Well, it's definitely a place that can support something like this, and I think they can support it in a much better way than even New York City could, because you guys remember how it was really broken up, right? We had Javits Center, we had the Radio City Music Hall, they had New School, they had people kind of trying to get through it. And I think that's probably the biggest criticism, was that people couldn't get from one place to another fast enough for the packed schedule, because people really do try to take advantage of these conferences to pack stuff in and make it like a really condensed learning experience. And I don't think that that'll be such an issue in Vegas, because it's built for that. The hardest part about Vegas is that you don't ever have to go outside, right? And I think if you're putting together an architecture conference, I'm assuming there will be some pretty amazing opportunities for tours. Lots of hopefully behind the scenes kind of stuff, or Hoover Dam, there is a lot of neat stuff there. So like the stadium, there's lots of construction going on. So there's probably lots of opportunities to see stuff being built. And so I think that it's probably, although not as interesting as a place like New York City, it's a very different backdrop. And I can't see why it wouldn't be successful there, because, people love and hate Vegas. I get that. But at the same time, like, that's not why we go to these conferences. You go to connect with people that you never get to see except for once a year. And,
right.
Our audience is there. It's a great place for us as a podcast. I'm not trying to sell it for everybody, but it's definitely going to be polarizing in that regard. Like you said, Cormac, you're like, oh, I don't know if I need to do that. But I also kind of think that it will support this kind of event really well. It'll make things pretty easy. It is a walkable city. I mean, it's not like Orlando in that regard. So I think that, while city is in quotes, right, it's kind of loosely, there's a lot of neat history in Vegas too. So maybe they're going to do stuff in the old town, back in the old strip, where the Fremont Street, and there's lots of stuff off strip too, definitely. So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see how it kind of pans out over the next year, or 9 months, to see what happens. 6 months, maybe. It's only 6 months out. So
6 months
crazy
from now,
yeah, it's moving fast.
Hey, before we leave the Autodesk University, I just want to, for a long time, when we think of Autodesk, is in our world was always just AutoCAD. It was AutoCAD. Yeah. And what blows me away by looking at their university site, and I think you mentioned it earlier, Evan, construction, product design and manufacturing, building design and engineering, infrastructure, media and entertainment.
Right.
I mean, Autodesk is just a giant monster of way beyond AutoCAD. And what this really when I think of other softwares out there, nobody, to my mind, is doing, at least in our industry, is like this. It has their fingers in so many aspects of all of those subjects that I just mentioned. They usually focus on, okay, we do one thing, or maybe we do BIM and Arc. I mean, it's so much more limited in scope. And really the only thing that to my mind, technology-wise, company and technology-wise, that comes close to this is Adobe. Because Adobe has, what do they call it? The Max conference or something? Right. That is similar to this in that it brings together all these different industries into one event surrounding their software suite, if you will. And it's just interesting to take a step back and think, 10 or 20 years ago, how different this all was, and how now we've got these two industry giants that basically dominate this everything that we do and interact with and watch, media and entertainment as well. It's just, it really just kind of blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what makes this event so interesting, because I think a lot of people write it off because Autodesk is the one who do it, and I'm not an Autodesk disciple by any means, but the weight that they have and the draw that they have, because there are a lot of people who are total disciples of this kind of stuff, and it is kind of religious at some level for a lot of people, oddly enough. But it really makes for a great framework to have really high-tech, future forward-thinking conversations. And and to share knowledge of how it's actually being implemented in places. So you can go in there knowing nothing and come out of there with quite a bit of information that has been shared like kind of at a peer-to-peer level. I mean, the speakers are all very open to sharing information, and even at a very personal level, not even just in a one to a class kind of a level, but coming up to them, talking to them afterwards, getting their email address, talking to them more, taking the conversation further. People are very open to that kind of thing because they realize that we are actually all in this together. And I think this is something that the AIA could learn from, and architecture in general could learn from this, is that a sharing economy is beneficial to the future of the thing. So this is one of those places where that actually happens. And it's bigger than architecture, for sure. I mean, I don't even know what the numbers, like percentage of disciplines that show up are. I'm sure architecture is a big one. There's a lot of Revit classes. There are still, believe it or not, a lot of Autodesk classes with very long lines to get in. But for the most part, the show floor is mostly BIM, Revit kind of stuff, I would say. And there's a lot of media and entertainment. There's a lot of real-time rendering, a lot of VR, neat stuff like that. Unreal, game engines, and Unity, and Autodesk even announced a partnership with Unity, which is a game engine builder for real-time environment stuff. So lots of neat synergies. I really don't like that word because it just sounds, it's just highfalutin, but it's one of those things where they do make certain things happen, and I don't know that they make them happen really well the first year, but it has been interesting to watch kind of the development. Like you said, I've been there for the last 4 years, and to watch kind of where they're steering the boat with BIM 360 and getting everything in one place. I mean, they really are trying to create an environment where pieces don't get lost, but also creating lock-in for the users, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this is how they make their money. So it's weird, but also cool in that regard because they are making some really neat tools, but you have to be all in on those tools. And I think that's probably the hardest pill for a lot of people to swallow. They still want choice.
Right.
Anyway, there's a lot there. Definitely go check out the website. We'll throw it in the show notes and you can check it out. I haven't looked at the new one yet, but we'll put it in there and just see what you think, because there's a lot. Like, it doesn't have to be software. It could be process. It could be training. Like I said, it could be all kinds of different topics in there that you might be interested in. You could take a lunchtime and learn something new every day. A lot of neat stuff there.
Cool.
And showing off like really cool projects like the new George Lucas Museum, the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art that's being built down here in LA. Like Zaha Hadid's office was presenting a class. I mean, there's a lot of neat, like high-end, high design kind of stuff going on there too. People sharing behind the scenes what it's like to work in a paperless environment and where things are headed in that way too. Anyway, I think that's probably enough to share for now. Like I said, I'll put together a video and hopefully that can tell a little bit more of the story. But honestly, it is a good conference. It is expensive, but it is worth it. So they had 11,000 people there.
It's sort of what you do, right?
Yeah.
So
totally. And there are other conferences out there, right? So this isn't the only one, but this one is just big and it's bold and it's fun. They do put together a very good event. I actually went ziplining during this event. So just to give you an idea of there's like one night where there's a block party and they rent this whole block called the Link, and where the big Ferris wheel is. It's not really a Ferris wheel, but it's called the High Roller. It's very Vegas, but it's like the Eye in London, where it's this giant Ferris wheel with encapsulated pods and go around. But they also have zip lines that go down over this whole kind of main street. So
I think you're giving lots of good tips to the organizers of the AIA conference on architecture for next year.
They do a really good, like I said, it's kind of like a cruise ship.
And you know what? I mean, that's what brings people back.
Yeah,
is, not just business, but make it fun.
Yeah, totally. All right, so you guys want to get to our next topic?
Yeah,
sure. What do we got?
Introduce it.
Well, let's tee it up here. So we got a letter from the email section of our website, the feedback section, and somebody who prefers to remain anonymous wanted to ask our question of us. And really, I think what it boils down to is, what do you do if you've been working in the industry, architecture, for let's just say 20 years, and you don't feel like things are really happening for you. And to make it kind of worse, you see things, it's just quotes, you see things happening to other people in a very good way, where people are kind of finding their own, they're getting bigger opportunities, but you kind of feel like you're being passed by. So the question really is like, what do you do? Is this something that I should aspire to do, or should I be content making a difference in the way that I make a difference and just being more of a supporting role and not necessarily being one that stands out? Zach, you guys think that sums it up pretty well?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
All right.
It's interesting because sometimes I feel that way.
Well, I think that's kind of, we're all going to have some variation of this experience, right?
Yeah.
So tell us what you're thinking, Cormac. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, on numerous occasions, I don't know if I jokingly say or whatever that I find more contentment not being the king, but the kingmaker. And it's, there's a lot of people, I look at it this way, there's a lot of success to go around in the profession and the projects. And there are people who they relish, sometimes need, in a lot of cases, I would probably say definitely need to have that recognition of success. And this is kind of running along the tangent of this letter, but in a way kind of there that, like, for me personally, let me just put it into a more personal response here, is I got into architecture thinking that I was going to, be one of these guys that are leading the charge, making a difference and all that other stuff. And a lot of times I play a role that's more on the support side of things. So I'm not always up front when people are getting the pats on the backs or the promotions or, the accolades and stuff like that. And there are times that it's bugged me. There's times that I'm just like, wait, he wouldn't be standing up there if it wasn't for me basically doing everything that's put him in the position to get recognized. And I was like, to me, I was like, well, that's kind of a petty attitude, to be quite honest with you. I think that I am contributing, and do I really actually need the pat on the back? Do I really need, somebody to say, "Attaboy, Cormac, that was a great job you did there"? And it got to the point I was like, no, I really don't, because I think that the success of the project overall and the continual, people coming back and, doing, saying, look, we had a great working relationship with the overall team. We want to work with them again. And to me, I look at that, again, it's purely a personal thing, as a success and, something that's positive in my bit, in my professional development. So I got to a point where I was like, I don't actually need the pat on the back. I don't need to be the person standing in the front. I don't need to be the face of something, big fat air quotes of the podcast there. But
you're the face of this podcast, Cormac.
No, I'm not.
Attaboy.
But it's and I know I'm kind of like, diverging a little bit from this, but but I think it's where I'm going with it is that I've felt this way a lot, or not a lot, but I've felt this way on occasion where I think it kind of sometimes it gets a little demoralizing. It's just like, oh damn it, I'm busting my ass doing all of this stuff, but I'm not getting the recognition that I think I deserve. And what's interesting is I just went through this leadership course, and one of the things was this term that came from David Rock, who's this leader in leadership training, and it's called SCARF. And SCARF is an acronym for, basically how you work and collaborate with other people and stuff. And let me quickly try to do a real quick kind of brain dump of what this is. So SCARF is an acronym. It means status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And so status is one big, huge thing that, I think this letter is sort of talking about, is that, we're all looking for some kind of like self-gratification or some kind of like status that you're being recognized for the good works that you're doing. And so that's something that's very important, when you're in kind of like the professional, world, and when you feel like you aren't getting that status, it starts to kind of, weigh heavy on you. And I think the letter writer is sort of feeling that way, that he's not really feeling very valued, or that he's not, being able to contribute, that he's, missed the opportunity to be a bigger part of the role and stuff. And I think that it might actually necessarily not be something that should be falling on his shoulders. That I think this was a missed opportunity from, his leadership of saying, okay, I talk about this a lot in our office about when we go into a project, we sit down with the entire project team and we talk about, we always talk about like an after action review after a project. But when we go into a project, we always sit down and we say, okay, what do you want to get out of this project? Whether it's, hey, I've never worked on design, so I'd really like to do some design work. Or, I've done a lot of design work and I love doing design work, but I also haven't really detailed anything out in a project, and I'd really like to learn more about detailing things. Or I've never done scheduling. There's just a variety of different things. I'm just throwing out some generic topics. But and so what I was reading when I read it is that there was that the leadership of the firm that this person's working for isn't really sitting down to try to do like a a team kind of like, let's figure out what what everybody wants to do with this, with a project or your career or something like that. And so he may be looking at himself as like, well, I've missed all these opportunities and stuff, and it doesn't always necessarily fall on your shoulders. And so I think that, going back to that weird little scarf model that I was, talking about, he's, feeling a little undervalued and underappreciated, and, but he's putting it on himself. And I guess where I'm coming from is I don't necessarily think that's necessarily on him. And so when I was doing a little bit of self-reflecting on, the being the kingmaker rather than the king, was I got to a point where I was feeling a little undervalued and underappreciated, earlier in my career. But then I kind of got to the point where I was like, but that's actually okay, because that's, to me, that's not really the point of where I want to now see my role. I actually find more satisfaction and more reward in my role as a project manager, as a mentor, as somebody who can help develop the profession, and help develop a bunch of people in this profession to be successful in the profession. Because to be quite honest with you, I'm okay with not having the attaboys and the pats on the backs. I'm actually okay with our profession being, and I'm going to throw out the big air quotes again, awesome. And so if I can be a part of that, that's when I'm like, yeah. Does that
really good?
Yeah. Does that even like remotely make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Makes a lot of sense.
What do you think, Neil?
Well, I think that this is something we'll all go through from a life perspective. So I'm going to take a slightly larger look at this. When we start our careers, things tend to happen rather quickly, right? We spend the first 4 or 5 years getting, it seems like every other year we're getting a promotion. We're moving up the list, and we're getting to that job captain level. Then we're getting to that project manager level. And maybe 10 years in, we've seen this rapid climb. When you look at your career, a relatively rapid climb from graduating college and moving into your career and kind of getting settled and trying to just figure out what you're doing, right? You may do some modeling, you may do some construction drawings, you're going to do some CA work, you're going to do lots of different things, and you're just trying to figure it out. But it's a lot to happen in a relatively short period of time. And then you go through this middle part of your career where, okay, you maybe have gotten good at something and you enjoy it, and you've spent, boom, the next 10 years goes by, right? And you're feeling good about it. And so now you're 20 years in, as our letter writer is now, and now you're at this point where, wait a minute, I just kind of feel like I've been coasting for 10 years doing stuff. You don't have that sense of all this rapid change. I've hit this project manager level or whatever sort of level, and you've just kind of been doing that for a while. And now it's like, well, what's next? Why am I not advancing? Why am I not doing something else? Why am I not the partner in the firm, so to speak, sometimes? And I think that in life, you have this, what has been called in the past, the midlife crisis. And I think that's kind of the mid-career crisis here that this person is experiencing. And we all experience this. It may be at different points, but all usually around this time. And you have to get to a point in your life and in your career where what is it that you enjoy doing? And then just keep doing that. That's what your career is. But you just keep doing that. You can also decide at some point in time, like I've done in the more recent past, where it's like, okay, well, I'm still doing what I do at work, but I'm also doing other things. I've been on the planning commission here locally. I've recently run for city council, and you start expanding your horizons a little bit. So you keep pushing, you keep doing things, but that's life. And I see that you have to get comfortable with what you want to do. And at some point in time, you can look back at your career and say, okay, what have I done? Am I going to keep doing that to pay the bills? And what else do I want to do? You've got in my case, I've got a family, I've got kids, and you're involved in that, and I'm doing these other things. And so, but you have to get comfortable with what you're doing in your life. And it may be you're at a point in your career where you have to make a decision, as Cormac has done in this case, like, well, wait a minute. No, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. I'm happy with where I am in my career, and I'm going to keep doing that. I'm good at it, and I enjoy that. And if that's the decision, then you keep moving forward with that. If you're not happy with where you're at in what you're doing in your job or the career in general, then you have to take a look at yourself and decide, what do I want to change? Or am I really just actually good at what I'm doing, and I'm going to keep doing that? I'm going to strive to get better. I'm going to go to Autodesk University, as we were talking about earlier. I'm going to learn more. Maybe I have an interest in modeling or doing some other parts of architecture, and I'm going to go off and do that for a while instead, and maybe take my career in a different path for a while. So that's kind of how I look at this. And it's really, there's nothing wrong with feeling this way. I think we all feel this way at some points in our life. If you're 20-something, you're not going to feel this way. If you're 40-something or 50-something, I think you will. And you have to get to a point where you need to move forward in some way.
Well, let me ask this, for curiosity's sake, and sorry to
Sure.
jump in front of you there, Evan, because I know you got something good too, but let me just ask this question, because, it may be that he's asking the question, so, all right, I'm 20 years in my career, I feel like I've hit kind of this wall, but I see all these kids coming in and they're, they've got this grasp on this, and this is purely hypothetical question, but it is a reality because I do see
Sure.
it in people, even in my office, that
Right.
are seeing kids come in and they're these go-getters and they're making their career happen, which to me is, both kind of rewarding to see people like really taking an active role in shaping the career that they want and not just to kind of accepting the career that they have. But, sometimes it's, if you're like a mid-level guy and you're just kind of sitting around, watching this happen, it kind of can get a little demoralizing. You're just like,
Sure.
why is this happening for them and it's not happening for me? And so for me, the question is, what do you think is missing in your career, or what is the roadblock for you that you aren't doing the same thing that they're doing? Because
Well, I would say that. Well, let me put it this way. What I see in my office right now, is that a lot of the younger staff, 2 or 3 years out of college, clearly they have an advantage over me in that that I felt I had when I started over the architects I was working with at the time. I came in with this sort of computer knowledge, if you will, and felt very comfortable with that I don't think the architects that I was working with at the time did. They were still drafting by hand, designing by hand, and I had this other knowledge, right? And it seems kind of silly compared to today, but I see the same thing happening today. They're doing modeling, they're doing things that now I'm in the position of the old guy, and it's like, wait a minute, I can't do that. So the decision I have made, because I'll just make this personal here, and everybody can take with it however they want here, but I've made the decision that, okay, I if I wanted to do that, could I do that? Absolutely, I could. I could go spend the time and do that. But as I look at the value that I bring to the firm, is the value that I bring to the firm going to be best compensated for me by being the best modeler or the best CAD person, BIM person in the office? Okay. That's only going to pay so much. And that's only going to limit my career. That is a limiting factor in my career. But firms need those types of people, right? Because we got to get the work done. So if you feel that that's what you're good at and that's what you want to do, and you want to be the best person that does that, that is a needed thing, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is not what I've chosen to do in my career. I see different things for me. I've given up that, and I've had to come to a realization that I'm not that guy. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the hotshot CAD person that knows all the computer stuff. I still know more than most, but I don't know what these kids coming out of school know, and I'm okay with that. I've been okay. I've accepted moving on, and I'm like, okay, well now how do I push my career so that I can get compensated at a higher level and take on more responsibility? And sometimes I've had to do things that I'm uncomfortable with. I haven't done full service CA work before in my career until the last year and a half, 2 years. And that's uncomfortable, but it's a learning experience. But that is something that I've seen is, okay, well, that's where my talents as an architect can be. I get paid more than the person that is doing some of the more, work in the office. And so I've made a choice. I'm moving in this direction, and I'm giving up something that I used to do. And that's the way would answer your question.
Sorry, I didn't mean to kind of. I mean,
No,
I think that there's some value to kind of like the perceptions of what you see as other people's successes, and you're like, wow, they're doing great. They're movers and shakers and all that other stuff. What am I missing? And you might, what you're probably missing is just the self-examination that you actually are contributing more than you think, and that you have a value that is probably very strong within, like, say, your own organization, or in the professional in general, but you're just not recognizing it because you're seeing the success of others, and you're just like, I want that. It's just like, no, but what do you actually have? What do you bring? Because you actually are probably bringing a lot more and doing a lot more than you're giving yourself credit for. You're actually contributing a lot greater aspect to the profession in a whole, just by doing good. I mean, to me, it goes like, I'm going to make it personal again, but to me, I feel like I am bringing a lot to not just my firm, but my profession by doing good work and passing that work ethic, my experience, my, the education that I've had, passing that on to somebody else so that they can take it and they can run. And if they do more than I did with it, well, hell, that's exactly what I want. I want other people to succeed and get better, because it's only going to make the profession better. So to kind of bring it back to, our letter writer, it's so you may feel like you've kind of hit a, the proverbial mid-career wall, but it's because you're not, I don't think you're doing yourself justice by looking at what you're actually, bringing to the table. It just, I guess.
It's hard to know, yeah. There's not a lot of context here, but
Right.
I could start off with a little story. I feel like coming through architecture in a design, the category that I specialize in is design. And I think that what was really interesting, an experience I had, was when somebody who's very high up said to me, oh, you just get to do the fun stuff. You've got it easy. You get to do what everybody wants to do. And this kind of goes back to Cormac's comment about the king makers, right? Like it alludes to a hierarchy that gets narrower and narrower as you get closer to the top. And we all go to school, for the most part, I'm generalizing, to become designers. And we all know that there are very few designers in the firms that we work for, right? So it's a natural kind of hierarchy that just gets created because there isn't room for everybody to do everything, right? And so when I heard that this person say that, basically putting me down by saying that, well, I don't know if they're really putting me down, but they're saying you only get to do the fun stuff. You've got it. You're so lucky. I have to do the hard work over here. And I think I've talked about this on the show before, but I feel like design is a struggle. At some levels, it's suffering, right? But I don't mean to say that like, woe is me. I mean to say that like, this is the suffering that I'm comfortable with. And I think that's what you have to pick in your career, is the suffering that you're comfortable with. Because, and that is not just architecture. That's everything. Okay. And I think what we tend to do when we analyze this kind of stuff, and sometimes we overanalyze it, right, is that we don't really know what the other person's suffering is, and we tend not to think of it that way because you probably would hate it if you got there anyway. I think we all know that the responsibilities placed on the kings, again, to go back to your earlier analogy, is very high, and it gets difficult to continue to do what you actually want to do when you're in those positions. So if you really want to be an architect, you probably don't want to be in one of those positions because you will never work on a project again.
Right.
So you have to start thinking about it on those terms. So what are you comfortable suffering through on a daily basis? And suffering for me on design or on digital practice or whatever it is, it's what I feel like I'm meant to do. And so I'm okay with it. And I think that is something that you should think about when it comes to this stuff. I think also you are in charge of you and you're not in charge of anybody else. So one of the things that was in your, was it SCARF?
Yeah.
Acronym was autonomy, right?
Yes.
Autonomy is a huge thing for that people need to feel on a certain level. And if you can't do that in the office, you can do it somewhere else. And I don't mean like go find another job. I mean do something like Neil was saying, in addition to what you're doing at work. We did that with this podcast.
Right.
And I can tell you that I was feeling similarly to the letter writer in this way when we started this podcast. And I've done a bunch of other things too. I wrote a book. I have a website that teaches people how to use 3D software. I got my license. Like, I invested in me. Nobody else invested in me that I was working for.
Right.
And because of that investment in me has created untold numbers of opportunity. And it's interesting how things change when that happens, right? And so I would recommend that you take a good look at trying to do something outside of your comfort zone that you might be okay suffering through, because I don't want to make it sound glamorous. Making a podcast every 2 weeks for 6 years is not easy, right? Making videos for YouTube is not easy. Writing a book is not easy. Getting your license is not easy. These are all things that are incredibly difficult, and we suffer through making those things happen. But when they do come to fruition in the very end, there is some serious reward that comes with that.
Yeah.
And it may not come from somebody else. And if you really need that, you need to find who that person could be for you to do that for you. And just tell them, like, be straight up and honest. Hey guys, I need this. I need to know, like, am I doing okay here? Like, what can I do better? You can ask for feedback, and hopefully you get the kind of feedback you're looking for if you've been putting in the work to achieve it. But just, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of rambling here, but I really wanted to talk about creating opportunity, because I think that's a big deal. You cannot control how other people, what they're going to do for you. And I've said this in my book. Like, no one else is going to take those exams for you, right? You've got to make the decision to do that. And I know that's not what this question is about, but that's just an analogy to this. You are not going to wait around for somebody to do something for you, because guess what? The person they care about is them when it all comes down to it. And so if you can start to create opportunities for yourself outside of the traditional structured venue that you're used to participating in, then maybe other things will start to happen. It'll put things in motion that you have no idea that are even going on out there. And it's pretty amazing how that can work out in the end. So I really encourage you to take a look at, actually, a book. I would go back to a book. It's called Designing Your Life, and it's written by two Stanford professors, and they have a fantastic book, and it really takes you through an exact process to make some pretty serious decisions with your life. And you obviously have to decide to go through with that. But what's interesting is they say that if you have a plan B, then plan A will most likely never happen. So you've got to get to the point where if you're super serious about doing something, you've got to burn plan B so that it won't distract you from achieving plan A. And I think that happens to a lot of us. We kind of got multiple irons in the fire, and you're never kind of quite sure which one's going to get hot enough, and you're always kind of keeping your options open. And I think that's okay for a while, but at some point you kind of really have to decide what plan A is going to be, and then burn the bridges for the other one so that you can actually make that happen, and go all in on that one.
Well said.
Let me throw out just a book. I'm not going to go on a long spiel or anything else, but this is something that my boss, it's one of her favorite authors, but it's also something that's kind of interesting. Is she suggests a book that she reads and rereads, and it's called Drive. It's the surprising truth about what motivates us.
Love that book. I think we talked about it on one of our older episodes.
Yeah, by Daniel Pink. So let me just throw this out there that it's a very interesting book. I've actually just started reading it myself, and it kind of starts putting you into a self, like realization of like where you are and who you are and all this other stuff. So it's interesting. I'm not going to go into any detail or anything like that, but I really just wanted to kind of throw that book out there because I think that our letter writer would really appreciate like reading that book.
Yeah, that one really goes into intrinsic motivation and the autonomy concept that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff.
I added it to the show notes, so definitely check that out.
Excellent.
It'll be in there. All right. Well, hey, let's wrap this episode up by reminding everybody that it has been brought to you by ARCAT. The music is by System Kid. You can subscribe to Archispeak on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or listen directly from our site at archispeakpodcast.com. You can follow the show on social media via Twitter and Facebook, and links to all of those can be found on the site. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and keep those letters coming and stay subscribed. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, seriously, thank you to our audience for writing in such great questions. We really love it, and we love interacting with you guys in this way. So keep it up.
Yep, keep them coming. Thanks.
Thank you.
Drawing straws and pails, me hard. I'm caught in a phone booth on the beach. You reach for your gun. Do I watch or run, or will someone call 911? Please, you were everything I wanted. Went overboard. You beat your babies for needing you, still your hunger to conceive. A brand new pup might cuddle up, but he won't be enough. Your greed, I'm caught in a phone booth on the beach. You reach for your gun. Do I watch or run, or will someone call 911? Please, you were everything they needed and more. Oh, and everything was magic, but more went overboard. I hate the way that you lied to me. Still, I love you anyway. Because you tell me every little thing's gonna